Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's special presentation hosted by the Institute for Social Justice. I am Prab Gill, Program Director of the Institute for Social Justice. The mission of the Institute for Social Justice at Union Institute and University is to apply theory to practice through scholars, practitioners, philanthropists, policymakers, and other leaders who are committed to promoting social justice and equality in the United States and globally through research, education, and policy. I would like to welcome everyone to our special presentation, Rethinking Haiti, Past, Present, and Future Promises, with our esteemed panelists, Professor Bayyinah Bello and Dr. Gerard Ferrer. Today's session will be approximately 90 minutes long. After the panel presentation, we will have a brief Q&A session where we will engage in questions from the audience. Please submit your questions in the Q&A feature provided at the bottom of your screen. We will hold all questions until after the presentation portion. Now, it is my honor to welcome our two moderators for today's event. Dr. Allardyce is a chair and faculty of the Humanities and Culture concentration of the PhD program in Interdisciplinary Studies at Union Institute and University, where she has taught since 2008. She is also the co-founder of Florida's-based nonprofit organization Center for Education, Training and Holistic Approaches, Inc., a nonprofit organization which operates the Toussaint Louverture High School for Arts and Social Justice in South Florida, founded in 2001. Her research interests include international education outreach efforts, particularly in Haiti, where since 2009, she and her colleagues have offered a training and support program for teachers, Teaching by Heart in Haiti. Dr. Allardyce had the honor of serving as a dissertation chair director for other moderators of this evening's program. The other moderator, Dr. Emery Francois. Dr. Francois serves as a chair of the District Committee of Special Education, Brentwood Union Free School District, Long Island campus. In her 2020 Union PhD dissertation, The Beauty and the Strife, a memoir of Haiti and her legacy in the United States, Dr. Francois addresses the ways imperialistic narratives of Haiti have impacted individuals of Haitian and other diasporas as she weaves remembrance with analysis of such narratives influences to tell how a young girl growing in adulthood as an immigrant in New York was formed through and in resistance to privileging views of people from the poorest country in the world. An inescapable phrase she found soldered to the name of her motherland. And in the act of creative resistance that her dissertation represents, Emery discovers in Haiti's richest culture contributions a model for re-narrativizing one's own life. A committed social justice activist, educator, Dr. Francois credits her UI&U education from inspiring her to launch the Social Justice Peer Program at Brentwood School District in Long Island, which has flourished for over the past 3 years in its mission to pair students with local mentors and provide them with a vision of a brighter future.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Gerard Alphonse Ferrer, PhD, Professor Emeritus, St. Joseph University, and eminent historian of Haiti, his native land. Following completion of his primary and secondary education in Port-au-Prince under the tutelage of his father, educator Alphonse Merville Ferrer, Dr. Ferrer was awarded a highly competitive scholarship to study at the Naval Academy of Venezuela. He graduated from the academy as laureate of the navigation class and served from 1953 to 1958 as an officer in the Haitian Coast Guard, from which he was dismissed when he openly opposed the dictatorship of François Duvalier. In addition to his Naval Academy degree, he also has diplomas from the U.S. Fleet Sonar School, Key West, Florida, and the Inter-American Geodetic Survey Cartographic School, Canal Zone, Panama. Between 1958 and 1963, he was incarcerated 5 times, including twice at the Fort de Manche prison for alleged political activities against the government. In 1963, having been put on a list, together with many officers and former officers, to be assassinated on April 26 during the infamous massacre of Port-au-Prince. He took refuge at a foreign embassy with his wife, and from there came to the United States, whose citizenship he now holds. Less than a year after his arrival here, he was hired by St. Joseph University, the Jesuit institution of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. While teaching there, he earned a master's degree in French and Spanish from Villanova University and a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. For 34 years, from 1964 to 1998 when he retired, Dr. Ferrer taught French, language and literature, Spanish, theoretical linguistics, applied linguistics, and sociolinguistics. During his retirement in Florida, he taught Haitian Creole for native speakers at Toussaint Louverture High School for Arts and Social Justice. During his academic tenure, and now while retired, he has remained constantly active in the Haitian community in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, California, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Florida, participating in conferences, publishing books and articles, giving lectures, as well as newspaper, radio, and television interviews. Dr. Ferrer and his wife, Nancy, have 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and now reside in Boca Raton, Florida. It is my honor to turn the floor over now to my friend, Dr. Gerard Ferrer.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for your introduction. I feel honored for your kind invitation to be a member of this panel. I salute my fellow participants and all of you who are attending this webinar. My family and I immigrated to the United States from Haiti in May 1963, when we barely escaped from a massacre of opponents ordered by dictator François Duvalier. We are now proud American citizens. Until our retirement, my wife and I worked as educators and participated in the formation of American youth. Among our fellow Haitian immigrants here, there are thousands of professionals, physicians, medical personnel, without whom some hospital would have to close, professors, teachers, administrators, lawyers, business people, laborers, etc., contributing to the economy. Never before the fraudulent election of François Duvalier in 1957 were Haitians compelled to flee their country. Such a sad decision became imperative when Duvalier installed a regimen of terror with massacres, assassination, tortures, imprisonments, etc. When he died in 1971, his son Jean-Claude inherited his macabre machine. In this book, I tell of 20 massacres and thousands of individual murders. In 1986, when the Sun was overthrown, the death toll had risen to 40,000, and hundreds of thousands of citizens had left the country. Those who came here by boat were pejoratively labeled boat people. American policies are greatly responsible for the creation of the Haitian migrant crisis. And I explain. Effectively, fearing the influence of the Cuban Revolution, fearing pathetically the influence of the Cuban Revolution, the United States supported the Duvalier politically and financially and helped them stay in power for 29 years. Historically, the two countries are linked by important events that, unfortunately, are not taught in our schools. Familiarity with Haiti's glorious past will help us know her better. In 1492, when Columbus, in his search for gold, tried to reach India by navigating westward on the Atlantic, he landed in Haiti. He did not just find gold. Better than gold, he found human beings. In his report to the kings of Spain, he described the native as peaceful and defenseless people, ideal specimens as slaves. Thinking that he was in India, he called them Indians. In fact, the island was inhabited by Taínos and had a population of about 1 million, according to Haitian historian Jusset d'Orsainville. By 1525, 30 years later, all of them had succumbed to the hardship of slavery, were exterminated or died of European diseases. In South America, 50 million perished. Coincidentally, in a few days, Columbus Day will be celebrated in the US. Last year, around the same date, my daughter Magali wrote the following article about, from which I quote, "Like so many kids in school, I was taught of Columbus' great adventures and how he discovered America, when in fact he had not. He invaded and destroyed it. His mission was one of colonization, enslavement, and exploitation, and all in the name of gold. Millions of natives were already living in and flourishing in America hundreds of years, thousands of years before his arrival. Columbus' invasion led to the enslavement of a Black race for 400 years. Like many people of color, I do not celebrate Columbus Day. On Monday, my family and I will commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day." End of quote. The Blacks brought in chains to Haiti from Africa by the Spanish, the British, and the French never submitted to slavery. For more than 3 centuries, scores of revolts were organized by many leaders up to the epiphany of Toussaint Louverture. August 1791 saw the start of the General Revolt conceived by Vodou priest Duty Boukman, secretly guided by Toussaint Louverture. During a religious ceremony, Boukman had them swear to live free or die. Toussaint initially served Spain in Santo Domingo. His goal was to take advantage of his position there to train an army of several thousands with the secret intention to use them to liberate the island. He left the Spanish and went to serve France, became general and governor of Saint-Domingue. By 1801, he succeeded in accomplishing the autonomy of the colony with its own constitution. Napoleon then sent his expedition of 1802, described by Haitian historian Jusset d'Orsainville as, quote, "the most formidable colonial expedition ever organized by France. 86 warships with 22,000 soldiers." The French saga ended with the most humiliating defeat of their history at the Battle of Vertières on November 18, 1803, and they had to surrender with their tails between their legs. Throughout history, many movements have been called revolutions. The American and Latin American revolutions were really wars of secessions when the colonizers rebelled against their metropolis. Rather than just creating a new nation, the Haitian Revolution was responsible for the liberation of a human race, the abolition of slavery, and the establishment of a new world order. It is the greatest of all revolutions. For the powers of the time, Haiti constituted a pervasive omen, since the abolition of slavery meant the loss of their source of industrial energy and creator of their wealth, the Black slave. From her very birth, Haiti faced what French historian Jacques Barros in his book Haiti de 1804 à nos jours called, quote, the impossible development, quote again, an economy grounded on slavery, no technical formation, racism in an imperialistic pro-slavery world, no help from abroad, threats and embargoes instead. Could a country have been born with more handicaps? End quote. A French boycott was to be expected. However, on the American side, why would a Thomas Jefferson, self-proclaimed defender of the ideals of liberty and equality, choose to be its fiercest supporter? He certainly understood the extent to which it had benefited his country. He no doubt realized that without the Haitian victory, there would not have been a Louisiana sale. Some historians assert that Bonaparte had in mind two goals for his expedition. First, crush Toussaint's revolt and restore slavery. Second, send troops to Louisiana to reinforce his grip there in view of a future invasion of the United States. A French colony next to the 13th state represented a grave danger for America, even if no further conquest were to occur eastward. It would block the United States' western expansion. The triumph of the Haitians meant the complete collapse of Bonaparte's second goal. In his despair, he sold Louisiana for $15 million, a territory of more than 800,000 square miles, doubling the size of the United States. Historian Henry Adams, grandson of John Adams, has emphasized the magnitude of the role of Toussaint in determining the destiny of the United States when he wrote in his book, History of the United States during the first administration of Thomas Jefferson, quote, if Toussaint and his Black should succumb to their fate, the wave of the French Empire would roll into Louisiana and sweep up the Mississippi. If Santo Domingo should resist and succeed in resistance, the recoil would spend its force in Europe, while America would be left to pursue its democratic destiny in peace. Toussaint, indeed, and his Black succeeded, and America was left to pursue its destiny in peace. Thomas Bailey, professor at Stanford University, in his book, A Diplomatic History of the American People, wrote, quote, John Adams and Toussaint Louverture, in whose honor statues should be erected in appropriate spots, are the forgotten purchasers, end quote. Abolitionist Wendell Phillips closed his famous 1861 speech with this memorable paragraph that an English professor of mine in Haiti, Dr. Mercer Cook. Some people may recognize this name. He had a whole class memorize that speech, or the conclusion of that speech. And here it goes, here it is, quote. You think me a fanatic tonight, for you read history not with your eyes, but with your prejudices. But 50 years hence, when truth gets a hearing, the muse of history will put Phocion for the Greeks, Brutus for the Romans, Hamden for England, Fayette for France. Choose Washington as the bright consummate flower of our earlier civilization, and John Brown, the ripe fruit of our noonday. Then, dipping her pen in the sunlight, will write in the clear blue above them all the name of the soldier, the statesman, the martyr, Toussaint Louverture, end quote. Our students do not learn either about two other important chapters of our history. The presence of several hundred Blacks from Saint-Domingue on our side at the siege of Savannah, and the immigration of thousands of Americans to Haiti in 1824. Effectively, in June of 1824, Jean-Pierre Boyer, second president of Haiti, announced his program for the immigration of Black Americans to Haiti. The news was well received in the North. On the 23rd of August of the same year, the ship Charles Gray left Philadelphia with 58 Americans, organized by Bishop Richard Allen. Among the first to emigrate was the bishop's son, John, who carried a letter from his father to President Boyer, in which one can read, quote, "My heart burns affectionately in acknowledging the kind offers you made to those few oppressed people here in the United States by offering them an asylum where they can enjoy liberty and equality." Remember this quote. It will come back at the end of this presentation. On September 2, 200 people, including some white families, sponsored by the Lowering Dewey Society for promoting the immigration of free people of color to Haiti, left New York aboard the ship Dewitt Clinton. Another ship, the Strong, was to depart from Baltimore on September 14. And on September 24, 200 more Americans left Philadelphia. On October 10, the newspaper New York Advertiser wrote, quote, "The ship Concordia is expected to sail to Haiti with about 160 colored persons, 6 vessels in Philadelphia, 1 at Port Elizabeth, and 1 at Alexandria, and several others at Baltimore are on the way to Haiti. It is calculated that between 3,000 and 4,000 of these people will leave in a few days, and that every fortnight, additional numbers will be shipped off under the direction of President Boyer's agent, who pays for the expenses of their transmission," end quote. Testimony about the good treatment granted by the Haitians began to reach the American public. On October 20, the United States Gazette published a letter from a man named Somerset to his relatives, quote, "When we landed, the inhabitants generally received us more like brothers than strangers. Their houses were open to accommodate us, and everything possible to make us happy and content was done," end quote. Indeed, before they were pejoratively labeled Haitian boat people crawling on this coast of the United States, there were American boat people welcome in Haiti. Haiti also participated in the struggle for freedom in Latin America. In 1806, Francisco de Miranda, precursor of the liberation of Gran Colombia, came to Haiti in search for help. Emperor Jean-Jacques Dessalines gave him money, weapons, and ammunition, and many Haitians joined his troops. Miranda failed, but Simón Bolívar continued the war. After suffering several defeats, he took refuge in Haiti, like before him, Miranda, for 6 months, from July to December 1816. President Alexandre Pétion, repeating Emperor Dessalines' gesture toward Miranda, provided him with money, a printing press, 1,000 rifles and ammunition. Thousands of Haitians then and later enrolled in his army to fight for the independence of Venezuela. Before leaving Haiti, he wrote to President Pétion, quote, "I am overwhelmed by your many kindnesses. In my proclamation to the people of Venezuela, I wonder if I will be permitted to leave to posterity an impeccable memorial to your philanthropy. I do not know if I should refer to your excellency as the author of our liberty." End quote. Pétion's answer: just abolish slavery in the countries that you will liberate. Bolivar did. Sadly, however, in 1826, ceding to American pressure, he was compelled not to invite Haiti to the Congress of Panama. President John Quincy Adams wanted to accept Bolivar's invitation, but faced opposition by racist congressmen who could not swallow the idea of white Americans sitting next to Black Haitians. Haiti was excluded, and Adams sent a delegation of 2 members, Richard Anderson and John Sargent. Anderson died en route to Panama. Sargent arrived after the Congress had entered, perhaps intentionally. Around the same time, in 1921, hundreds of Haitians fought in Belgium's War of Independence against Holland. And in 1831, that of Greece against Turkey. A relatively recent contribution of Haiti to the defense of freedom in the world deserves recognition. In 1941, President Élie Lescaut, after declaring war on Germany and Japan, created a military aviation corps that would engage in German anti-submarine warfare in the Caribbean. As part of an agreement with the US, 686 fighters were given to Haiti, and 6 young men were recruited to participate in an instructional program at Tuskegee. In 2009, the last survivor, Mr. Raymond Casagnol, was invited by President Obama to attend his inauguration. In addition to the political causes of Haiti's tragedy, multiple natural disasters have aggravated her situations. Hurricanes, flood, a catastrophic 7.5 earthquake in 2010 that destroyed the capital and killed 300,000 people. This year, 7.5 earthquake that erased dozens of towns from the map and killed thousands. Instead of expulsion, Can't we emulate President Boyer by offering, quote, I said, remember that quote, it will come back, an asylum where they can enjoy liberty and equality, end quote. Lafayette, we are here, has been our often repeated expression of gratitude toward France. In turn, as a matter of equal, if not more gratitude, why not come to the help of the Haitians and say, President Boyer, we are here. The flow of refugees from Haiti and other poor nations will continue and increase. Gloomy events can be expected as long as there is a starving world next to the rich nations that have built their fortune on the back of the enslaved of America, the colonized of Africa and Asia, and the universally exploited today. This is a global humanitarian crisis. What is needed to obtain some relief and eventual solution is for the rich nation to join together and contribute to create conditions that make it possible for the population of those poor countries to stay home. As an expatriate, I can testify, and on behalf of all other victims, that nobody, absolutely nobody, will ever want to abandon their motherland unless life there has become unbearable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your most enlightening presentation, Dr. Ferrer. We'll have the opportunity to respond and to take questions and answers and comments after both speakers have presented. Thank you so much.
It is my honor to introduce our second speaker, world-renowned historian, Professor Bayyinah Bello. Bello's first earned an administrative degree in New York State University, then went on to gain a BS in education and an MS in linguistics. Her professional teaching career began in 1969 in the USA while teaching Arabic at Mohammed University of Islam. There, she discovered the joy of writing and published several language manuals and children's storybooks. Bello has lived in Liberia, Nigeria, and Togo, visited all West African countries and several others on the continent. As a lover of art and artifacts, established and ran an art gallery in Lomé. Back in the United States, she worked as a publicist at the Museum of Natural History. After gaining a master's degree in primary education and more teaching experience, returned to Haiti in 1979. There, she taught Wassa language and culture at the State University of Haiti. She also founded the Citadel International School, bilingual school for primary and secondary age children, aiming to aid young Haitians returning home. As one of Haiti's preeminent anthropologists from the State University of Haiti, Professor Bayyinah Bello is among the professional educators to have dedicated her life's work to the struggle for human rights and dignity for the Haitian people. A humanitarian and advocate in her own right, Professor Bello continues to contribute time and resources to assist in the development of program based on a procedure conceived by her. It states that the greatest knowledge is the knowledge of self. Once one has developed the knowledge of self, one has no other basis to envy another, to desire that which is not naturally yours, to promote or practice corruption. One is empowered to generate reciprocity, which is the foundation from which brings abundance and prosperity. Bayyinah is fluent in Haitian, French, English, Arabic, and Wassa. She is currently working as a professor at the State University of Haiti, as well the international representative of Fondation Félicité. Bayyinah's publications span from 1970 to current, from Beautiful Black Words for Beautiful Black Children to the recent SHEROES of the Haitian Revolution. Professor Bello is committed to achieving the primary goal of Fondation Félicité, which is to develop an education system beneficial to all those affected by the MAFA. And it is a proud moment for me to introduce the esteemed Professor Bayyinah Bello.
Thank you, Dr. Emery Francois. Thank you to Dr. Gerald Ferrer, who spoke before me. And thank you for those who organized this webinar this evening. Thanks to the wealth of information that Dr. Ferrer presented, it will enable me to shorten my presentation. I forgot to ask you, but I do want some pictures to come for those who are looking to look at some of the pictures. I call this OURstory, missing chapters. So I like to talk about those things that people are silent in history books generally. For example, one missing chapter is the Tainos, the original people of this continent, of the Americas. Whether we talk about Cherokees or talk about Hawawaks, Simones, et cetera, all are non-people who just happen to disappear as the Euro-Christians invaded the land. And the second big chapter that is iced out of history is the presence of women. And sometimes I tend to say that actually God did not yet invent women. That's why all the history that we learn is all about him, he did, he that, he this. And so in fact, we are learning and teaching a so-called narrative, historical narrative, that is missing 60% of the population, leaving out 60% of the population. So we're going to, Ubuntu is a key word in African culture that refers to the fact that I cannot exist unless there is a we. So having gone, your Christian belief is just the opposite. I am it. And if you just talk about me, that is the history of the country. No, that's not real. That is an illusion. So Ubuntu is a word that people would need to learn about. But I will not take the time tonight, because I want to play more with pictures. One great woman in Haiti's OURstory, Queen Anacaona, who was among the 5 rulers, the crown, what they referred to as the crown. The Tainos had this practice that to rule the nation, the island, you had the five people. Whether it's 2 women, 3 men, 3 women, 2 men, 1, 4, 4, 4, 1, whichever way you make the 5, it has to have both female and male. And at the arrival of the Euro-Christians, the crown was made of 5, that is 4 male and 1 woman, Anacaona. And in the invasion, 4 men were killed within 3 years. and Anacaona fought for more than 10 years until 1503 is when, through tricks and lies, she was taken and dragged from Leogan, actual Leogan, to Santo Domingo, put through a so-called trial where she is accused of treason against Spain, found guilty, and slaughtered. She is burnt and hung. Another woman I want us to see is this woman, Agbaraya Toya, who's a military woman from Dahomey, who at the time had two armies, a female army and a male army. And ultimately, Agbaraya Toya was brought to Saint-Domingue, sold, she freed herself, and met in her flight with another woman who was about to deliver a baby, helped her, that the mother died, but before that, hand her child over to Agbaraya Toya and asked Toya to raise her child and make sure that this child knows freedom. Another important female figure in our OURstory is Cécile Fatima, who is the woman who organized what is referred to in books as Bois-Caïman, but in fact was a congress to determine what we would do in order for our children and our children's children not to suffer slavery, the horrors, the ferocious system of slavery. And that the key person in organizing this Congress on the night of August 13 to 14, time was told we were to meet according to a position of the moon. And the meeting was to end at a particular position of the moon. So we were meeting with using the entire universe as our structure. You know, the time is done by this, the geography, everything was well organized. There were keynotes, codes, names were changed. A lot of work went into. She took 4 years to plan a less than 1 hour meeting. We need to learn to do this. Today we have computers and all of that, cell phones, but we don't seem to be able to get meetings done properly within the time limits that we set. So among the many women, I also like to mention Lieutenant Sani Belair. There were quite a few women officers in the Army. Captain Guillemette Charlot, Colonel Diane, etc., etc. So all these women are totally overlooked. A key battle during the revolution is the Battle of Crête-à-Pierrot, where less than 1,000 Haitians were besieged by 12,000 French well-armed soldiers. And Rochambeau had said that within half an hour, this battle would not last more than a half an hour. Well, that was on March 2nd, 1802. March 10, the battle is still going on. March 15, it goes on. March 20, things are still hot, and we're still there. The French have lost more than 3,000, and the Haitians are still fighting against thousands of French. Ultimately, we actually won. And one of the key people in this battle is Marie-Jeanne. This is a fabulous woman we need to learn to know about. She is always dressed in many different outfits simultaneously. She's a sharpshooter. She is a spy, etc., etc. Fantastic woman. And the final battle that Professor Ferrer mentioned is the Battle of Vertières. So on November 18, 1803, we put the French, their huge army, on their knees. They had no choice. We won. And Rochambeau tried everything he could to get away from to sneak out of the island. But every boat that he tried to negotiate with, he couldn't accept. What they asked was more than he could afford. So ultimately, he had to go and face Dessalines. And his first gesture was to turn over his what do you call it? His sword. But Dessalines refused to take it. Dessalines said, "You were a good soldier. You were doing the work of your country. You keep your sword. I'm going to send you back to France. I'm going to give you the food, the weapons, the boats to go back to France. But you tell your government never to come back on this island again." So that's how magnanimously Dessalines sent him back. And so the Declaration of Independence on January 1st, 1804, and on October 8th, 1804, we created an empire. Dessalines became the emperor, and Félicité, his wife, Empress Félicité of Haiti. And Dessalines' letterhead, did I put it in here? No, I did. Dessalines' letterhead clearly states Haiti, Empire of Freedom. So that is what we created. We also, after Dessalines' assassination, General Christophe Henry became king, and his wife, Queen Marie-Louise of Haiti. So these are elements that are continuously ignored in our in world history. And in fact, as we looked at what happened in Haiti with women, with the original people of the land, how they were silenced or erased from the narratives, we looked at other places and we found that to be true on all the islands. The island of Saint Croix had 3 women freed this island, but never mentioned. The children there don't know about it. In Cuba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not our subject tonight. So this is the past. In the present, Professor Ferrer mentioned so many of the contributions of Haiti to the world. And simultaneously, as Haitians do for others all over the world, then we are continuously being attacked all over the world. As a matter of fact, this past July, a princess from Greece came to Haiti to say thank you for what Haiti did for them way back then. But it was like 100 and something years later that thank you arrived. It was interesting, but better late than never. Now, where we differ, Professor Ferrer and I, is in the future. I don't believe Haiti needs to be helped by anyone. I believe that all these Euro-Christian pirates needs to stop stealing the wealth of Haiti, need to stop imposing people at the head of the country that know nothing and care nothing about our people. So if those 2 things are stopped, stop putting fake elections and picking horrible folks as leaders, placing them as leaders and backing them with your weapons, and then stop stealing the gold, the diamond, the iridium, the petrol, everything that Haiti has. So if you just do those 2 things and back off, Haiti will take care of herself and bring herself to her true place in the world. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing history. So thank you so much, Professor Bello and Dr. Ferrer, for your presentations. I am still taking it all in. But to get us started with our question and answers, let me ask the first question. While considering the date for the forum, actually, Dr. Bello mentioned the consideration for October 6th. Can you let us know a little bit more about the significance of today?
I'm sorry, as for some reason I'm not receiving clearly what you said.
Okay, I indicated that you had made a suggestion for October 6th while you had considered, the date for the forum. And if you can elaborate a little bit more for us today specifically, what is the significance of today?
Thank you for this opportunity. One of the things that Fondation Félicité does is to celebrate the birth of all great folks in our OURstory, our ancestors, female and male. So today, October 6th, brings the 254th birthday of King Henry of Haiti. So, of course, we at the Fondation, we have dinner, we invite people, we talk about who he was, what he did, what were his, as you can see, I'm dressed in green, his favorite color. And this is cakes and setup that we have that is in the background. So every year for the past 23 years, well, 21 for the Fondation, we celebrate on October 6th. He was born October 6th, 1767. So we celebrate. On May 8th, we celebrate Queen Marie-Louise and Empress Félicité, who were born on the same day, May 8th, but 30 years apart, 1748 and 1778. So those are, some of the things, because one of the things they do in the narrative, the colonial narrative of our OURstory, they usually omit date of birth for all of our people. They only tell, everybody could talk about the date of death, but the date of birth is so unwritten and, of course, open to all kinds of debates, unnecessary talks, not even debates, in fact. So that's the reason October 6th is important to us. And in passing, I must say King Henry is one of the people who brought great wealth to Haiti. Also, King Henry, as a lieutenant, he was in the Battle of Savannah. He fought in the United States, for the United States. And when he became king, he created Haiti's money, the gourd, and brought in all the equipment. People were saying, have it done in France, in England, or whatever. He says, what, do they have 2 heads? Do they have 4 arms? If they have 1 head, we have 2 arms, just like them. We're gonna make our own money for ourselves. So we made, under King Henry, we made gold and silver coins. The goods was made in gold and silver coins in Haiti. And he brought great wealth. Wonderful things were done. He built the citadel, of course, but people always talk about the citadel, the palaces that he built, but he built a lot of schools and hospitals. The code, the work code by King Henry is a very powerful book, very powerful information. And even today, I think a lot of countries would gain to apply some of what is written in the code, the work code of King Henry. In fact, some of it is taken. For example, the US Social Security is from King Henry. The US took it, translated, reworded it, of course, and made it the Social Security Act. But actually, King Henry was the first person to come up with law that says, after you work 20 years for an institution, then the institution owes you to do this, that, and the other for you. So this came from King Henry, whom we are celebrating today. So happy birthday, King Henry of Haiti.
Thank you so much, Professor Bello, and not only for that answer that is very informative and inspiring, but for your presentation itself. We have an opportunity to open the discussion to several questions. And I'll ask one that is triggered by both of your presentations and ask you both to respond. So, Professor Bello, you said very emphatically that Haiti does not need help from the outside. And there's actually someone in the chat who says that he agrees with you. Is there room for international relationships is there room, for instance, for people that are not Haitian or Haitian American to contribute to Haiti's right to live as a free democratic society? Is there any kind of infrastructure that you see there's a role for the international communities to play?
Well, I believe that people need to, first of all, need information. If a people is forever harassing, stealing, lying about another people, it means you have a problem. If I'm always saying that Emery Francois is, she's ugly, she's this, the whole world goes about saying Haiti, the poorest country in the hemisphere. That is a lie. Stop it. It's not true. Haiti has more than 10 times the amount of petrol that Venezuela has. Haiti's gold mines replenish faster than the average gold mine. So that's not so. So the first thing is to change the mental structure. As soon as we each can question what we take as, oh, this is a fact. These are sentences that people just throw out without thinking, conditioned to repeat. If we can do this work, that's the first gift. In fact, as I wrote when I was inviting people to help because of the quake, I said the first thing you could do for us is smile. Smile, come with an open heart, and be willing to share. We do not accept charity at Fondation Félicité, but we will share if someone is willing to share. And sharing, that is a law of life. Okay, that's how we stay alive. We take in oxygen, transform it, and give back carbon dioxide that another life form grabs, transform it, and give us back oxygen. That's a law of life. So there are many things that we can do one for the other, but we have to start with truth. Without truth, there cannot be any justice. The base of truth is two things: truth and reciprocity. So if we can come to this mind frame, then we could look at together and see all the things that we could do together to help each other. A structure that is in existence right now, I do not know. And I think even if there is one, I'd have to examine it from up close and see the base of its structure before I would be involved.
Thank you for that. There's a couple questions that's coming in. Please put your questions in the Q&A. Although I did see a question that's also appearing in the chat, area. But I will ask this first question that was in the Q&A. I agree with Ms. Bello. Haiti needs not to be taken care of. The question is, to what extent that contemporary Haitian leaders can shape a future for Haiti, given the internal conflicts in which they are engaged?
Well, internal conflict on which they are engaged. Let's take anyone. First of all, whoever is today in official positions as leaders, who placed them there. Okay? So when we say leaders, how do we define leaders? So if we're going to go on with things as they are now, of course, nothing can be done. Forget it. But if we're going to look at leaders, people who understand that they are the individual, Ubuntu, as I said earlier, the individual is at the service of the collective. That's the first mindset. Okay? So if we are leaders because we understand we are here to serve the collective, then yes, we're qualified and we can come up with what is necessary. Look around the world. Haitians are leading all over the world. If you take sports, you will find how many Haitians are winning in this, that, the other. If we take politics, we will see, sorry about the dogs who are invading the sound. Okay.
If you need a second, we will also going to address the same question in terms of your input, Dr. Ferrer. Dr. Ferrer, to the same question.
Which question? Could you repeat it? That has been a while.
Absolutely. To what extent that contemporary Haitian leaders can shape a future for Haiti, given the internal conflicts in which they are engaged?
Yes. Many years ago, there was a study by the United Nations that concluded that among all the countries in development, they like to say today, they don't like to say under development anymore, all the countries in development, Haiti was the one that was most equipped to develop itself. That we had all kinds of professionals, technicians, etc., laborers ready to work in the development of the country. But there are, well, also many of them had left the country and are abroad and would be more than willing to return if the conditions in Haiti permitted. Now, with the exportation of brain that occurred under the Duvalier, Haiti lost the cream of the cream at a certain time. But recently, the intellectuality in Haiti has known a rebirth. And I believe that both abroad in the diaspora and in Haiti, we have all the competency, all the technician, all the professional who would be able to work together. But a very well-known professor and politician, Haitian professor and politician, Mr. Leslie Manigat, one of the most competent Haitian that ever existed, I would say, in this century. Well, he said that in Haiti, there is a plot against competence. This is not true. There is a political plot against competence. There is a political plot against the development of Haiti because from 1957 to today, the people really able and willing to participate in the political, social, economic development of Haiti have not been allowed to do it because the power has been in the hand of the ignorant. Thank you. but there is hope. There is a youth today. I think there are a lot of young, competent people. It's just for Haiti to find a way to identify those people or give an opportunity of those people to participate in the development of the country. And one thing that is really a very, very strong obstacle today is that the present government has lost control of the country. The country right now is in the hands of gangs, of drug dealers, of traffickers. Sad.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrer. I think that we were interrupted too. We have several questions, really fascinating questions coming in, and we want to get to them, many of them related to what is already being discussed now. So just to go back to Professor Bello, if you're able to, I think that you were still finishing an answer to the last question as well.
Right. So I was saying that that the first thing is we need people who have a certain mindset. And as far as governments, stop creating havoc in Haiti. Haiti don't make guns. So who bring the guns in? Who creates the gangs? Let's be for real. Let's ask the real questions. The corruption is created from the international first. It's 2 steps. A, put useless Haitians at the top, and then since they don't know what to do anyway, so they just steal the money. There's no thinking. There's no big help for this. So we need people who know who they are and who are willing to understand that life is about reciprocity. Without truth, without justice, there is no better world for nobody. It may look like it's looking good in one side, but actually, no one will have a better world if certain people are keeping others from living a decent life.
Thank you. The next question in the chat is for Dr. Ferrer, and perhaps, Bayyinah, you've already given your answer, but certainly might want to add to it as well. This is for Dr. Ferrer. Given that most colonized nations have adopted whiteness, which leads to the political corruption that exists in all Western governments, how best can the international community support Haiti's independence, beginning with reparations from France?
Could you repeat the question again? Because I was
Sure. Absolutely. The question is, given that most colonized nations have adopted whiteness, which leads to the political corruption that exists in all Western governments, how best can the international community support Haiti's independence, beginning with reparations from France?
Okay, yeah, I see the question now. The question of reparation has been aborted by one of our elected leaders. In the 1990s, for the first time in the history of Haiti, a president was elected by the people. The majority of the people voted for Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Now, Jean-Bertrand Aristide make it the centerpiece of his political and diplomatic decisions, the restitution of the French debt. After independence, Haiti was blackmailed, forced into paying a debt to the people against whom she had won the war. And of course, the retribution due to Haiti, the reimbursement due to Haiti is worth millions today. And whatever people say, Mr. Aristide was right. France owe us that money with interest, which is worth billions today. But Haitians believe that they overthrew Aristide. Haitians did not overthrow Aristide. The United States and France kidnapped Aristide. They did not kidnap Aristide because Aristide was a bad president for the Haitians. If Aristide was a bad president for the Haitians, it's a problem for the Haitians to solve. But Aristide was overthrown by France and the United States. He was kidnapped in the middle of the night. We just had a president who was killed in the middle of the night by foreigners. So this is not a first. The president assassination is not a first. I consider that the kidnapping of President Aristide was the first. And President Aristide was threatened. In the book that I just mentioned, I talk about that. There was a certain Regis Debray, I don't remember the names of all of them, who participated in that plot with the ambassadors of France and America. And Aristide was kidnapped in the middle of the night by foreigners. They were not Colombians, that they were Americans and French probably. And because the French don't want to return that debt, to pay that debt to Haiti. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Professor Bello, would you like to comment further?
I see.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last thing that was said. Was trying to handle the.
So, Dr. Ferrer, would you like to just restate your conclusion to the question, if you like?
Oh, the
Professor,
conclusion, the last thing I said.
the last thing you said. Yes.
The last thing I said, I say that France owe us restitution. The debt of independence has to be the money we paid for independence, the recognition. We paid that money so-called for the recognition by the world. No, it was blackmail. So yes, France owe us that money and it must be restituted. I don't know if this is what you meant.
I absolutely agree, except it's not just France. Germany did it too.
Yes.
Other countries did it as well.
Yes.
So if it's time for us to collect, we have to make the whole list and collect from all of them. But I would also want to change that. Earlier, somebody mentioned about the international community. What is the international community? If it is the international community, then Haiti, Cuba, we're all in it. Why are certain countries called the international community? What are the others? The non-existing community? See, we have to be very careful. We are using this conditioned language, which is sending out a certain type of energy with a lot of things already pre-established in the language that we're using. So we must question all of it and revise it. So there is no international community if it's not for everybody. If everybody's not in it, then it's not the international community. So it's the same as talking about poor Haiti, the poorest. No. This type of language must stop if we want a better world.
And I think going by what was just stated, and this is a question that applies to both, but the question that is posed is that Haitian leaders are most likely to blame outsiders for their own failure. To what extent Haitians are responsible as well?
There is, if you're not going to assume responsibility, you cannot change anything. That's a law of life. Okay, as long as I can blame you for whatever happens to me, then I cannot change the situation. It is assuming our own faults. For example, when I say that, okay, I look at the situation in history, we're having our children recite all kind of horror stories. They are not history. So I took it upon myself to do the research and get the information. So I don't need to say so-and-so wrote, their book is no good, this one, no. Just, hey, this is what we know. There is no date for, we don't know the date of birth of our various ancestors and leaders, SHEROES and heroes. Then I go out and I do the research and I get it. So there is responsibility is part of, you cannot be a leader if you're not responsible. And if you have to blame somebody else, then you're not a leader because you're not responsible. Okay? Now, that's one side when you're talking about the reality. But there's also the fact that foreigners come into the country, pretend they're having an election, and then they pick the worst of the worst and put at the head of the country.
Yeah.
So that's a fact. You got to face up to the fact.
Yes.
So we cannot at the same time say, well, since he's already there, then he's a leader. No, that's not a leader. It makes no difference who placed him there. We saw that with the 2010, a major earthquake. Towns are turned into plastic towns. No housing, no, there's people all over streets, parks, everywhere under plastic in a tent or something. And then they say, oh, election, they must do election. But how can you do election when people don't have a place where they're staying? People are not sure how they're gonna drink water. People have, the large majority of those who should vote are not in a state of mind to choose, to vote. But while there is nothing for the people, a few people are given the money to put billboards with their pictures. Each billboard, $35,000 to $50,000. We have no water, we have no food, but there is money for billboards. And then you're going to have the charade election. And when the foreigners don't like what the, who came out, I'm not for him either, but I don't, but they don't like the winner, they smash him out, remove the one who comes out number one, pick two that they want, and have a second turn, and then pick who wins. The who win was probably, out of 19 candidates, was probably 16, if the information I have is correct. But he came out number one because he's handpicked. That's the real crime. That's the first crime that we must look at. If we don't deal with the hands of foreigners in everything we do, oh, we've not spoken about the US that kidnapped the entire gold reserve of Haiti in 1914 has never returned. If we're going to talk about people reimbursing what they have stolen, we have to deal with that too. And that's probably worth a lot more than what France has. So we have to look at the facts. So whether you are Haitian or not, if you say you want to help Haiti, you have to be dedicated to truth. If this is the truth, then that's what we have to all say, no matter what the written speech, the given narrative is, and what kind of threats they will bring to you. When, what they call these people, mercenaries, foreign mercenaries are brought to Haiti, they are arrested by young policemen who don't know what games is being played. Heads of police don't want to accept to fill the paper to say that these people are arrested. But anyway, when finally it's done, then the US ambassador comes to the police station, take the mercenaries, put them on a plane and fly out with them. So what are we talking about? Where is justice? Where is truth? That's where all the corruption gets done. So if we're going to talk about justice, we have to speak truth, and we have to courageously deal with all the truth, not some of it. The one who creates the marionette, I don't want to fight against a marionette. If there's a marionette in the National Palace, let him stay. I have no problem with the marionette. I want the marionetteer who's pulling the string. So before I deal with marionettes, I want to deal with the marionetteers. That's how you solve problems. Go to the roots of it.
All right, thank you. We are down to our last few questions. We're down to the time that would allow for the last few questions. So I'll ask one more from the Q&A, and Dr. Francois will ask a final question before we close out. And then we'll have an invitation for you all to join in further discussion. For now, the penultimate question for the Q&A is this one. With Daniel Foote letting the world know that America has played a major role in Haiti struggles, what actions do you suggest Haitians can take to free themselves from America and the core group which Daniel Foote mentioned?
Truth is the biggest weapon. If we commit ourselves to speaking the truth, and truth leads to justice. Without truth, there is no justice. So if whatever the core group is saying or the US government says or whatever, if you just swallow it, then don't tell me you want to fight for anything. Got to fight for truth. That's number one. All books, important books says, know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. That's the base. If I am an alcoholic, when I go to some place to be treated, the first thing they'll ask me to say is to say, Bayyinah Bello, you are an alcoholic. I am Bayyinah Bello, I am an alcoholic. If I can't say that, I'm not ready to stop being an alcoholic. And the same is true for everything. Until we face up with truth, admit the wrong done. When you can face up the truth, you will admit the wrong that you've done, then you're ready to repair the wrong that you've done. But as long as you're fixing it, arranging it, decorating it, hiding it. We're not ready for anything. Just continue with what's there.
Thank
Diane,
you.
could you repeat the question?
Yes. Just pull the Q&A back up. The question is, with Daniel Foote letting the world know that America has played a major role in Haiti's struggles, what actions do you suggest Haitians can take to free themselves from America? And the core group, and core is in all caps, and the core group, which Daniel Foote mentions.
Okay. I think we are being strangled. The first thing we should do, if ever we can, yes, we can? No, I don't know, is to somehow get into a way that we are going to elect our own leaders. Now, a few years ago, Haiti had some alleged elections, and there was a runoff. The runoff was between Mr. Celestin and Dr. Manigat. What happened? There was no runoff. Somebody named Martelly was designated as president of Haiti. This is where husband now, Mr. Manigat, said there is a plot against competence in Haiti, but it's not the whole fault of the Haitians. It's also part of other countries' foreign policy. Somebody had some interest that better Mr. Martelly as the president of Haiti, not for the interest of Haiti, but for the interest of foreign countries. Now, yeah, we have to take control of our governments. We must be able to elect our own leaders. Now, another thing also, Haiti now has a resource that she never had before. Even when Haiti was the first country in the Caribbean for development, in the 1950s, we were ahead of all the countries of the Caribbean except Cuba. Today, we are behind. But while we are behind, we have a resource that none of those other countries can have. Tourism may disappear, and the Dominican Republic is going down now because tourism is not doing so well. But we have a resource that we should organize to use that resource. I'm not saying to exploit that resource, but to use that resource by giving the opportunity to the people who hold that resource to participate in the government and in the development of Haiti as equal partners. And those resources are in the hands of the diaspora. We have 2 million upper class and middle class Haitians in Haiti. Even our poorest Haitians, when they come here to the United States, they work hard. And most of them are not poor. They may be lower middle class, but they work so hard. And they contribute, according to the last thing I heard, they contribute more than $2 billion to Haiti every year, billion. So the contribution of the diaspora and the return, the active return. Imagine thousands of Haitians who are retired now would go back to Haiti and invest in Haiti. But again, the main problem is the foreign powers who want to give us their leaders for us. I hope this is what you meant, Diane.
I find that very compelling. I find both of your answers extremely compelling and on point, and we have a lot to think about and a lot to consider. in pursuit of the truth and in pursuit of Haiti's destiny to be a free and self-governing nation as it has the destiny to be. Our time is about time to end. We'd like to ask our audience to bear with us just for a few more moments for one more question from the chat that Dr. Francois will pose, and then to hear some information about continuing the dialogue as we go forward in terms of the Institute for Social Justice.
I see a couple of questions that were indicating in terms of with recent events. Were the General Assembly able to, at the United Nations, able to help Haiti? And also in combination to that, how can we say that Anna Kaona's legacy has shaped the Haitian women of Haiti? And how may we contribute to supporting their efforts?
Was that for me?
It was for both. It was a question that applied to both.
Well, I already said, to support the effort, one, you have to do work on yourself. If you think just the way you are, you're going to come in and you're going to change. You're not. Let's look at the facts. Where did you go to school? Just like me, you went to school in the United States, in France, at the colonizer's school. So to whatever degree, you have a colonizing mindset. So if you face up to it, then you can put it in its place, and then you can allow your freedom fighting mind to become the dominant from which you operate. But if you just close and you say, well, yeah, I'm qualified to do this because I have a PhD from blah, 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 I'm sorry. You will make a lot of mistakes. Like we've seen many people with goodwill make a lot of mistakes. Got to start by doing a certain work on yourself, questioning yourself, and being open to what you did not know before. I look at, as I, been for the past 30 years, I've been teaching about women in IT's history. And 10 years ago, maybe, the government printed a bill, a 10-word bill, with Lieutenant Sanit Belair on the bill. It was the first time with a real picture of a woman on the bill. I went around asking people, intelligent people, educated people, who's on this bill? I said, oh, that's a lieutenant, that's a captain. Captain, I think it's John or Paul, or the picture is there. But in the mindset, a military shape is male. It's written under it, Lieutenant Sanit Belair. Sanit is a female name. People don't see the woman. So we have to be aware that there is a conditioning that we have to undo if we want to do something different from what is going on now. So we have to, and each has to work for himself. I cannot change you. Only Emery can change Emery. Diane can change Diane. Gerard can change Gerard. Bayyinah can change Bayyinah. That's where it starts. And then we can come together and build something serious, something that is not just another shape. You see, slavery have many forms. We think of slavery when we see the chains and the whips and this and that. But slavery can be a fine car. Slavery can be debts, credit cards. There are many ways. We have to look at things for what they are and face up to our flaws. And then we can work on the better tomorrow. And all these institutions, UN, blah, 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 they are set in their ways and they are part of the colonizing system. So they cannot help as they stand.
Dr. Ferrer, would you like to also speak to the legacy of Anacaona?
I don't think so. However, I can give you a few remarks about her. She was one of the latest queen, we can call them queen or cacique, together with Kaonabo, organized the resistance of the Taínos. And yes, I don't want to say of the Indians. Well, while talking of Anacaona, while I may not expand on her, I know that she and Kaonabo were two of the strongest leaders on the island, on the whole island. But while I may not expand on Anacaona, I may seize this opportunity of my weakness, or my instant weakness in that area, to mention something that is dear to me. Anacaona, Kaonabo were Taínos. They were not Indians. The same way that the Apaches, the Navajos, the Seminoles, and I could go on the whole list, they are not Indians. It's about time that in the name of Anacaona, for example, in honor to Anacaona, it's about time that they wake up and stop the name calling. Calling them Indian is an insult. It's just like calling a Jewish person a Nazi. Imagine how insulted a Jewish would be called if you tell me he's a Nazi. The Seminoles, for example, that is something that really gets to me when I see it. When you drive on the Florida Turnpike south, there is a sign there. Something that says Seminole, what reservation? Yes. Seminole Indian Reservation. It's about time that they say that they are not Indians. You want to put Seminole reservations there too? Well, it's another thing. You need a war of independence of names. Stop calling my places reservations. That reminds me of what happened to Cacique Henri in Haiti. Cacique Henri was another cacique. He was the last one, the last survival. I think in the 1530s or 1535, he was sent to Santo Domingo. The first reservation was in Santo Domingo. Cacique Henri was sent there with a couple of thousand of survivors. So Seminoles in Florida, I'm here in Florida, Seminoles. I see that sign every day that I drive on the turnpike. It upsets me. You are not Indians. And reservations look like a concentration camp. And stop calling yourself tribes. You're not tribes, you're nations. You are people, but you're not tribes. I don't know if that satisfies Diane's question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And that certainly takes us back to truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our time is more than up, and we've enjoyed our time with you so much. Thank you both for your presentations, Dr. Ferrer, Professor Bello. I want to
I
thank,
enjoy meeting Dr. Bello also, and Dr. Francois. Thank you very much for being with me.
yes,
It's an honor. Thank you.
it's an honor for us too. And I
Yes.
want to especially credit Dr. Francois for conceiving this panel, and also to thank Prob Gill and the Institute for Social Justice for hosting us, and for all of those in the audience. If we didn't get to your questions, we apologize. We honor the spirit in which they are asked. And we would like to ask you to please look in your emails within the next few days for a follow-up letter from us and an invitation to attend further and perhaps more dialogic panels such as this one, where we have the vision of allowing people more opportunity to interact and to have true conversation. It's our vision that such a series of workshops might culminate in an action plan for supporting the rich cultural and political future of Haiti. Thank you all so much, and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Thank you to all.